Hi, Matthew Hetz.
Rob Voicey, so good to see you.
Great to see you too.
Good to see you.
Why don't you tell us your name and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Matthew Hetz, Hetz, live in Los Angeles, native. So this call for score came out for a string quartet with the Argus Quartet, which I've heard of. It was for a certain time frame and had an earlier piece, a single movement quartet through a composers group I belonged to, Nakusa. And they presented it through a read-through, which is not a concert. And I learned from that to make some corrections in the phrasings and so forth. And this call came out. I thought, well, I'll give it a try. And so then I wrote two more movements.
Matthew, tell us a little bit about what's this piece about?
Well, this quartet was written, I think, 2021. So my mom, 2022, my mom died November 2021, and I was her caregiver for many years. So it was very hard on me. Go through grief and caregiver recovery and so forth. And I have a lot of other pieces which are a bit more angst driven. You know, they're rather serious subjects. So I wanted to do something lighter. So I wrote this quartet in the key of A. I'm a tonal based composer, not traditional diatonic harmonies. And for me, it's just very weird and subjective, but each key has its own color. It's just like, it's like intuitive. The world does not turn a color, but it happens. So for the key of A, it's blue, different shades of blue and A flats, different shades and so forth. So I like the key of A. So I wrote this quartet in A, and I call it blue for that reason. And it's lighter by and large. The two outer movements are much lighter than what I've had written earlier. The middle movement is in a minor mode, a bit more dramatic. And that's the basis of it.
So you're no stranger to strings.
I play violin. I will not call myself a violinist because I know violinists and I cannot play as well as they do. But I play. I'm okay. I picked it up late in my 20s. So it's a weird instrument because it's like this is here, and I play the piano. They're going opposite, and it's really unnatural. So, but it's really nice to play to have that sound going right to your ears. There's something about a violin which can be, I can't describe it, addictive, but very satisfying to play. To play well takes a lot of work, believe me, a lot of work. But yes, and through that I can meet a lot of musicians in orchestras, which has been very nice, very good for me. And I was the president of 2 orchestras for 16 years: the Culver City Symphony Orchestra and the Marina Del Rey Symphony, both in Southern California, and played in the orchestra at the same time. So that's part of it. And with the pandemic, concerts stopped. And recently, I have not been practicing that much. I need to, because concerts, I'm not playing that much in orchestras. But I have a friend who's a good violinist. He's on my case to practice more. And I said, well, Robert, I went to practice. I haven't picked up the violin in a while. I said, remember, the bow's in the right hand, violin's left hand. So that's pretty good.
Is this a premiere of your piece?
Yes. I had a read through the first movement, and it was a read through. So I don't know how, it was a pickup group. I don't know how often they performed. I had no access to the rehearsals to do things, so it was okay. They were good, but there were those moments thinking, did I write that? It may have been them, and that happens. So I went to the piece, read through it a lot, and did some changes, mostly to phrasing. Phrasing is I'm finding out, very important and very delicate situation on especially for strings, really instruments with strings, on how to present your music. Do you want phrases? Do you want individual notes? How long are the phrases, and so forth? And will that interval work as a phrase, and so forth? So that's been very helpful. Yeah. So it's constant. It's really constant work. No way around it.
So what brought you started playing violin at 20, and what brought you to composition?
Well, I began music lessons like 15, 16, and there was a piano in the house. I just never played it. All of a sudden, it was an old beat up player piano. Some keys didn't work, and chip keys, and the player part didn't work. But I started playing it. Nobody else was playing it, and I just gravitated towards that and started taking some lessons. And I just wanted to write music. So that's been a long road. I know I've made progress as a composer for my early compositions. So I don't know, it's just part of it. And that comes from my mom's side, pretty much. My dad was not a big music fan. So, but I think there's just something sprung out finally, something submerged out of my being towards music. And composition has always been part of it. So to have Rob offer service to have performances of works, because that's how composers learn by and large, is you hear your work, you think, well, that works, doesn't work, or I'm going to move on to something. It's been fantastic. It's really been a great service in the pandemic era we're living in. So it's been good.
Well, everything out in the open. I'm a composer too. So, but I think people forget we're a composer, we write, and they figure like, oh, it's a masterpiece and that's how it gets out in the world and so forth and everything. But it's really as a composer to grow and expand and so forth, we need to write, have our music played, and then we listen to it and then we write more, right?
You think, oh my God, did I write that? Or you think, oh, that kind of worked. Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So yeah. It's a growth. It should be a continuous growth process. Absolutely.
I remember when I was going to school, and I had a unique experience where, we only worked with musicians. So, my teacher would be like, oh, first cellist of the Israeli Philharmonic is coming tomorrow. Write him a piece. Go home. We'd have to go home, write a piece and so forth, wow, and come in, and then they would play our piece and just rip it apart and go through it. And then they'd be like, okay, go home and fix it. And, I was that guy who would go home and write another piece. But I still remember this one musician going through, and, anyway, we're all students, so there's
Yeah.
a little bit of friction going on, right? And my teacher had to come in and say, look, you have to understand, like, the composer is hearing his piece for the first time, and we're three things are going through our heads immediately. The first is, is the musician playing what I wrote correctly?
Right.
And we have to figure that out, like, right there on the spot. The second is, did we write it correctly? Right. Maybe, we wrote something wrong and we figured it's going to sound like this and it's not because they're interpreting it and we just didn't write correctly. And of course, the third thing is maybe this piece is just terrible.
I think we've all been through that. Yeah.
Yeah. For every piece, every first, especially the first listen, right?
Yeah.
Maybe, there comes a point where you get to know your piece, but that's the deal, is you need to get to know it.
Yes.
And vital for a
It's
composer.
Vital. And it for the overall ecosystem of classical music, it helps classical music because, like biodiversity, the more diversity, the better for the system. The more contemporary music's out there being heard, the better for the system, the culture of classical music. So it's so important for musicians to play modern pieces, so they know what's, and for audience to hear modern pieces of all kinds, of all stripes. Yeah.
And a thing too that I think is kind of lost. Like, so, anyway, I've done, a lot of concertizing over the years and so forth, and, presented a lot of different music and a lot of different styles and aesthetics and so forth. And I remember somebody, I was inviting to my concert, and they were like, well, what does it sound like? I was like, it doesn't sound like anything that you've heard of before.
Right.
I guarantee you, though, you come, you'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
Will you like everything? You won't. But you're going to take something that you will enjoy.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of surprise of it, that, not everything is the best of the best of the best and so forth. And something that might, even, let's say, you or me as a composer, that'd be like, oh, I need to write this better, I'm going to come back and do that. Somebody's going to hear something else in the same exact piece.
It's amazing. Yes.
And maybe if they're a composer, they're inspired to go somewhere else. Yeah. Or if they're a listener, they're like, wait a second, I like this. Yeah. Where can I find more?
Exactly. And on that idea of, a great piece, Johann Sebastian Bach, considered by many the greatest Western composer, when he's in Leipzig, the town kind of hated him almost. I mean, it's like he's writing this incredible music, and it was forgotten the day he died. Forgot before he died. So it's so fascinating with Bach. I've really become a huge admirer of Bach. Study his works for composition, but just his life and his music. But it was like, how could people not at the time hear this work and say, okay, we got to preserve this? It didn't happen. And a lot of his works are lost. So as composers, for us, I think it's very, for me, I keep that in mind. It's like, it's very fluid, very fleeting. You can hear a piece, people may like it and then forget it, or people may say, yeah, I'll hear it again, or what else have you gotten, or have you written? But it's the key to that is to have it performed. And so again, I'm going to say it again, but Rob with his service is providing that. So somebody may listen to that. So if I say 2 months from now, I'm kind of a piece of mine played, here it is. They think, well, I heard this piece, I like it, I'll listen to his piece. But if that first piece hadn't happened, they don't know about the second piece, and they may not listen. So it's so important to have performances. Yeah.
Matthew, thank you so much.
Oh, right.
It's anyway. I love your music, and
thank you. I love yours. I heard your pieces. Yes.
And it's a pleasure. I appreciate you taking. Anyway, I appreciate the support and you taking the time out to, like,
Sure,
yeah.
Okay.
It's
composers have to support each other.
We do. We're all in it together.